Hello, and welcome to the East Africa Business Podcast. I'm Sam Floy, and I'm here on the continent to learn about the emerging business scene. I'll be interviewing startups, investors, and organisations who are all playing their part in helping the region develop and grow. And in doing this podcast, I'll be sharing with you the things that I learn along the way. If you consider businesses that solve Tier A problems, safe drinking water is pretty much top of the list. Across East Africa, people are unable to drink from the tap and so are left to either boil their own or buy expensive water in a bottle. Galen started Jibu to address the need, creating a franchise where local entrepreneurs could treat tap water at source and sell it in reusable bottles to people in their neighbourhood. In this episode, we discuss how the business started, the benefits and challenges that come from the franchise model, and Jibu's vision to provide convenient, safe drinking water for all. I hope you enjoy. Cool. Okay, so I'm here with Galen in the Jibu offices. Galen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam.
So just to get us started, can you tell us a bit about Jibu and what it is?
Sure, yeah. Jibu equips entrepreneurs to start their own water treatment and bottling businesses. So we've combined a franchise model with a finance model. And what we do is set up a water treatment system that can take water from any source and then sell it through a high visibility retail point. And we pair entrepreneurs with those turnkey businesses so that they can start their own businesses and serve their communities with safe drinking water, as well as have an opportunity to generate income and livelihood for themselves.
Amazing. And when did you started it?
Yes, I'm the co-founder. We're actually a father-son business. We started in 2012.
Are you the father or the son?
I'm the son. Yeah. My son would be a young son to start.
And so you started in 2012. So is it just in Uganda that you work?
No, we work in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and we actually started in DR Congo out front too, but that didn't work out, so we closed it down.
I see. What was the strategy? Was it to go to all four straight away, or did you start at one and then go from there?
We went all three straight away, so Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda, and we got a lot of flack for that, and sort of heard quite often that that's really stupid or spreading ourselves thin and we should focus on one area. But it ended up being a really good strategy because we wanted to really push the envelope and see, okay, what can work and how do we avoid sort of over-pampering a single pilot. And a lot of times what will happen is you can launch a pilot or project and then have so much focus on it that you make sure it succeeds, and then from there build expectations that you could scale across borders, all different places. But we sort of had a slower start because we started all these places at once, but then we didn't get a false positive or false confidence that we could scale it to other places because we operated in three very different contexts up front. And we were also able to learn more quickly because we could just still learnings happening in one place, operationally or infrastructurally, and apply them across borders really quickly. And we also weren't allowed to give too much attention to any single project or pilot.
At a sort of high level, how are the three different? So you said at the beginning DRC, Rwanda and Uganda were all pretty different. And actually we'll put Kenya in as well. How are the four? how do they sort of differ?
Yeah, well, from the business standpoint, practically there's very big differences. Where Rwanda, the distribution model is completely different, and most clients pick up directly from our franchises, whereas Uganda, there's more of a culture of delivery and convenience. So that distribution model is much different, and we have to bring water to people's homes directly. In Congo, it was a difference as far as the alignment of vision and business sense was really the big difference, and it was hard to find partners that were really aligned and understanding the business model clearly. I think culturally there's also differences around price sensitivity, around what different products preferences. For instance, in Rwanda, customers tend to like a opaque jerry can bottle, whereas in Uganda, customers really don't like that bottle and don't trust it. There's also, trust in the infrastructure altogether is much different in each country too. In Rwanda, because of the rule of law in place and the infrastructure that's pretty sound, there's more of a trust of any new products on the market. So it's easy to gain traction more quickly because there's an assumption from the consumers that if it's on the market, it's probably safe to consume. In Uganda and Kenya, there's so many rip-off brands and not enough really regulation to control things that there's a mistrust for the consumers, so it takes a little more time to build that trust up front. And because of that, we have to have a little bit flashier branding, bigger, sort of bigger image, more marketing efforts, more direct one-on-one conversations to build that trust. But once we get there, I think those Uganda and Kenya are much bigger markets and actually have a lot more potential than Rwanda in the long term.
So just so I can picture it, who is the typical customer of Jibu?
Yeah, so the target, well, as a franchisor, as a franchise model, our customer as Jibu corporate is actually our entrepreneur. So how can we equip our entrepreneurs to make their businesses successful? But the end user of those entrepreneurs is someone in the middle 70%. So typically, the top 10% can afford to buy bottled water on a regular basis. They don't need Jibu. And the BOP, about 20% can't afford Jibu at the price we're selling at. So at the price we're at, which is maybe 5 times less than Ranzori or premier water brands, it opens up a massive market, and it's really that middle class, the average Joe, that our franchisees are reaching. We have other ways to subsidize water to reach the BOP also, but
BOP
bottom of the pyramid. Yeah. But the core market is primarily middle class customers.
Okay. So let's talk about in Uganda I'm someone in the middle 70%. How do I hear about Jibu?
You hear about it through the entrepreneur in your neighborhood. So every franchisee serves only about a 1 kilometer radius right around their franchise. And because of that, there's pretty high touch, below the line marketing that happens. So door-to-door sales agents, flyers, just the branding itself on the shop, and the micro franchises, or the smaller shops that buy from the franchise itself or the water production center itself. So it's usually word of mouth or just signage that you'll see.
Okay, and when you say micro franchisee, so that means that I'm a franchisee, I come to Jibu, I go to Jibu directly. They're then not selling it to a customer, but to another business.
Yes, exactly. So our whole pipeline for new franchisees are these micro franchises. So we set up a franchise, and they have a full capacity to produce water, sell it out the door, and then for new franchisees, we have whenever someone comes to us and says they want a franchise, we tell them to first go partner with the existing franchisee. They buy a wholesale from that franchisee at a discounted price, and then they set up a branded Jibu shop where they're just a distributor selling directly out of that shop, reselling at a slight markup. So for some micro franchises, they're doing it because it's just good business and they're making money as a micro franchisee. But for the majority, I would say it's because they're buying and they want to have their own franchise eventually. So it allows us to establish a long-term relationship with them and track their performance, and also test a new neighborhood, because some micro franchises are launched outside of a given franchisee's territory. So an open area or open town where we haven't been yet, someone can go and launch a micro franchise there. We get a sense, is there a market right around there? And then we bring in the franchise later, and we already have someone that's pre-qualified to be a franchisee.
Nice. Let's talk about Uganda. When you go to a new territory, what's the main or is there any resistance to what you're doing? Before we launched, I was always afraid of the water mafia and all that type of stuff. Who is the water mafia?
Well, there's the idea of water bottling companies, and they'll interpret, even though we don't see ourselves as competing with them, we're really competing with boiled water. They'll interpret us as a threat and try to shut us down or hijack things or whatever. But the major threat actually has just been the regulatory authorities, not in Rwanda or in Kenya, but in Uganda. The Uganda National Bureau of Standards is heavily incentivized by bigger players in their field, and they're incentivized to keep anybody new out from being certified, the one having sort of standard certified, quality certified, especially in anything that's beverage related. So that, that's been difficult and a long process. But as far as market and consumer acceptance, we haven't faced resistance in that way. We've faced sluggish responses in different neighborhoods, but we've never faced customers saying, go away, we don't want you here. I think the fact that it's locally owned and that size of business is serving a need that everyone tends to recognize, that it's pretty well accepted usually.
So you're saying that the main competition you have is boiled water. So just clarify, so the tap water in all these countries is not safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we first started, actually, the idea was, let's go to the rural towns and start Jibu, because that was an assumption that was where the need was. But when I was arrived here, we started doing water testing all around the region, and we never found safe water out of a single tap in all of East Africa, in any major city. We had one exception actually in Musanze in Rwanda, in the mountains. We tested water and it was safe. But besides that, we're like, wow, the need is right here. Everyone has to boil. Boiling is so expensive and impractical. It's time consuming. It creates more smoke in the air, like all of that. So that's really what we're trying to replace, is how we make water cheaper than boiling, more convenient, better quality. Because even boiling also doesn't remove any contaminants in the water. It kills bacteria, virus, or any sort of living organisms. But if there's other contaminants in the water, it's not removed and it's still not safe to drink. And often people don't boil the water long enough to actually kill things, and so there's still this major health concern. Plus, it's so expensive and time consuming, all that. So we're like, let's start where there's critical masses of people, and there's this massive underserved market, and then we can drive the innovation and make it more efficient and get more and more rural. So right now we're starting to pilot into smaller towns, and that's been a pretty good response so far, because we've learned and we know more what we're doing and how to manage it. I don't know how far we can extend down into an actual rural setting. Right now we're looking more at small cities and towns, but we could, if we can drive down our capex, eventually we can do that too, because an entrepreneur operating in a rural setting would have lower operating expenses as well as a lower price point, which would kind of be a wash.
So, is your background in water?
No. How did I get into this? Well, so I did the Peace Corps in Morocco and did a few projects there, some vaguely related to wash and water, but ultimately I came out of the Peace Corps wanting to do business, because I felt like a lot of the interventions that we made or development work was ultimately not sustainable, and there was no economic backbone and wasn't rooted in anything that would last beyond when I left. And I felt like all the approaches were very patronizing, fundamentally patronizing towards the beneficiaries. And there wasn't any eye-to-eye partnership that was actually happening. So I came out motivated by those sort of philosophical principles. And then my father had consulted with World Vision International. They brought on this sort of team of private sector guys, business guys, to help them brainstorm why a lot of their projects were failing after 2 to 3 years. And they do more water projects in the world than any other NGO, which I wasn't aware of at that time until later. And they came up with this idea of ownership of someone could take water out of a well, treat it, and then sell into people to bring their own jerry cans, and so that concept sort of, at first I thought it was just kind of nonsense and whatever, but then I sort of started thinking about it more and more, and then I agreed to just try to explore if it was possible with my father, and then he agreed to basically finance an initial pilot. And since I never imagined working with my dad, honestly, up front, but this was sort of perfectly what I came away believing in the Peace Corps, and it was meeting a basic need. And I think anything I want to invest my time into is going to be something like health or water or some sort of infrastructural need where it's a black and white issue that needs to be addressed. And since I sort of had the ability to build a model around those tenets that I come away with the Peace Corps, I thought, like, let's give this a go and sort of see what happens. And originally I was just committing to doing it part-time on the side, and then I think before we knew it, we were both in it, all the way. And that was in 2012. So we launched the first pilots in 2013, and then since then we're growing now about one franchise a week. So we're growing pretty quickly, and we've got the model down to the point where our entrepreneurs are making money, and a lot of people are getting water at a much cheaper cost than they were before. So so excited about the sort of where we come, and a lot of it's been driven by our entrepreneurs because we really had an eye-to-eye partnership mentality. So the fact that we put the water in a reusable bottle, that whole brand and sort of aspirational quality was developed by our entrepreneurs, and we never would have known how to position the product or anything like that to make it attractive to the average consumer here. So there's also the distribution model, all these pieces. I think truly having a co-invested eye-to-eye partnership is what led us to come to a model that can work and expand in a great organic way.
So if you, it seems that obviously drinking water is one of the biggest sort of, there's always a need for it, right? Is this globally, is this the only way to solve it, or like in other countries, how do they get around this problem?
Yeah, no, absolutely not the only way to solve it. I see Jibu's solution as sort of the stepping stone solution between when the infrastructure is not quite there yet and has a ways to go, and when infrastructure can be in place. I mean, physics says that it's always going to be more efficient to have a centrally treated system that's piped throughout the city. The actual treatment process isn't the issue in these emerging markets. It's more the infrastructure itself, and then enforcing that infrastructure stays in place. So even if there's not sufficient piping systems, and even if they're in place, the building code is not enforced, and then someone cuts in the pipe and then everything's contaminated again.
So you're saying something happens to the pipe, then the whole thing.
Well, I'm saying So like building codes, and everyone sort of a lot of the pipes are even open pipes, like main lines and all of this stuff. And the infrastructure itself isn't really protected, and then half of it's sort of contaminated along the way. So no matter how good the treatment is at a central facility, it's sort of irrelevant, and until there's enough infrastructure overall in place to support a system that could have, be closed end to end. This is sort of the best. I think a decentralized water treatment is the best solution. Whether or not it's Jibu's business model or anything like that, I think I think that is relevant as far as the maintenance and sustainability, but I think ultimately decentralization as a concept is probably a pretty key part of how to fill that gap in the step between a market emerging and then becoming, premature to becoming a fully developed infrastructure.
I was interested when you said you got some learnings from working with your entrepreneurs. You said the first one was using reusable bottles. Yeah. Are there any others that have that kind of surprised you? There's quite a few. I mean, I think
I think there's no way to substitute for a local owner. I mean, so even if we had sort of incentivized compensation models or commissions or anything like that, the creativity and sort of innovation that comes out of an owner in an area is just much greater than anything you can motivate through any other means. So I think on an individual basis, franchise to franchise, all of our franchisees are entrepreneurs, and they're finding out ways to make it work with their local distribution channels, with how they market to their customers, with how they motivate their employees. All those pieces, I think, are why it works. And I'm confident, even in Rwanda right now, the brand's become pretty strong, and we can put a sign in the shop, and they start to build a customer base organically without doing any marketing or sales. But I ultimately know even with a strong brand like that in Rwanda, it would still fail if there wasn't an owner behind it, sort of making those everyday decisions to really push it to success. So I would. Anyways, your question was whether innovations, but I think it happens on a day-to-day basis in each of these micro areas, and I'm pretty confident in the ownership piece being sort of the secret sauce to scalability, because I think in most emerging markets the concept of ownership is sort of the dream. It's like own your own business, own your own assets, and just and make it. No one really wants to be employed. There's not as much aspiration around being an employee, and so. And then ownership of something that's actually profitable too creates those talent pools. I mean, one of my concerns up front when starting was that we wouldn't find enough qualified entrepreneurs, and that's absolutely not been the case. We have way too many qualified entrepreneurs to know what to do with, and we have to choose 1 out of 30 for a franchise, and that's because I believe we've established a product where everyone understands, it meets a real need, and also it's a profitable opportunity. So those two things combined, it's addressing this whole unemployment crisis and opportunity crisis, as well as the whole challenge, all the challenges around water. So in any case, I think that's been sort of the key to success, is finding out something that works for entrepreneurs and works for us, and it's this co-investment, aligned incentives across the board.
So let's say I'm a budding entrepreneur, and I think, and someone says, "Oi, Sam, you should think about being a Jibu franchisee." How would I go about doing it? What's the sort of, how long would it take? What upfront cost would I do? What's the sort of onboarding process?
Yeah, sure. So we'd say first go and start a micro franchise. So make an agreement with an existing franchisee and start selling water, and we'll see based on your performance, like if you can be a franchisee. So you have to reach a minimum volume threshold to become part of the candidate pool based on your performance as a micro franchise, and then from there you submit your question. You submit a questionnaire with us, a CV, and then we do due diligence check on your micro franchise to see if there's price compliance, to see the cleanliness of your shop, and then if you have employees, how you're managing them, and then from there we take all that information and review it, and we'll take you to a selection committee interview. And in the selection committee interview, we score based on a few different components, and that's the most subjective part of it. But hopefully the weight of whatever performance we've already done the due diligence on is the most important factor. Then if you're qualified as a franchise, you invest a licensing fee, and that's about $1,000. And then you buy your initial inventory too up front, and that's sort of a way of ensuring that you have a working capital to run the business in the first place, because you sell that inventory, it's the cost of goods sold, and that you can kind of use that as your initial cash flow to get the business to the break-even point. And so once you pay the license fee, then we build out a full franchise, brand it, everything down to the point of sale system, and we train your staff that you hire. We train you, and then you are off and running, and usually within a month to 6 months, depending on the market, you break even, and then after you break even and start selling about 1,000 liters a day, we invoice you based on how much water is produced. So the water meter reading is what we use to recover the capex that we invested up front, and then on an ongoing basis, that's how Jibu corporate makes money. That's our primary revenue stream, is just that all-in-one fee. We call it the water fee, flat fee per liter sold.
So how long are people often in the micro franchisee stage?
Yeah, it really varies. So the quickest has been about a month and a half, and the longest has been about a year and a half. So it really depends on the entrepreneur, how quickly they can grow their business, and then also the opportunity. So there's some micro franchises that develop in open territory where we're not ready to launch yet. In those cases, they've had to wait longer because we're like, well, we don't have the technical capacity to serve that area also, but you will, likely be the person when we go there. So yeah, it varies.
And roughly, you said there's $1,000 for the license fee, and the cost of inventory. I mean, is this is it manageable for people to raise this kind of capital, or do they need to go and get a loan or something?
Yeah, it's sort of a nominal number, and we want it to be real skin in the game and a real co-investment by an entrepreneur. The majority of our entrepreneurs have to go and raise it from family and friends. To date, nobody's had to take out a loan, an official loan with a bank. Some have used SACCOs, and families and friends. Savings and credit union, so SAs, an informal savings credit union group.
Okay.
And so it's an amount where it's a real investment. We want it to feel like a real investment for entrepreneurs, but it's not, as far from a financial perspective, it doesn't really make sense because we invest about $30,000 in the launch of each franchise, next to that deposit. Next to that licensing fee that they invest. There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot.
What are these entrepreneurs doing before they become
it's all across the board. I would say a lot of them tried their hand at different entrepreneurial activities. Most are fairly green. Most of our entrepreneurs are in their 20s, and have had a job or two somewhere. Some have gone through university, some haven't. Sort of across the board. We're trying to reach lower and lower though with our micro franchise model, and now we have girls that are 17 years old that are running their own businesses, and we actually finance them up front for their initial inventory in the shop, and then we do all this training and sort of high touch support for them to try to accelerate the process. They can become franchisees. I was going to say with the licensing fee too, something that happens is we finance them for the initial goodwill deposit. So typically with real estate in East Africa, you have to pay an advance deposit on the rent, and that's 3 to 6 months. So we usually finance that for the entrepreneurs too. So in some ways it kind of like gets passed around the licensing fee back into other things, but there's still that locked up cash flow, which makes, psychologically sets the stage right as far as it being ownership and a co-investment.
And so you say that the upfront costs for you are quite high. Where do you get your financing from? Is this all retained profit, or have you got outside investment?
I wish it was all retained profit. We're profitable against operating expenses in Rwanda, but in Kenya and Uganda we still have a ways to go. We raised blended capital, so about 50% of our capital is from donors and 50% from impact investors. We closed our Series A in January of 2015, and we just opened our Series B a couple months ago. Our Series B, it's heavier on the equity side and less on the grant side, and there's some mix of debt also in that bunch. But hopefully this will be our last round, and from here on out we can use debt to service the expansion. But we always sort of have that tail end on the cash flow because of the high capex up front, which takes us, in some cases taking us 9 months to recover it, in some cases taking us 2.5 years. So it depends on the franchise's performance.
And with the sort of the end customer, is it that they're using this water just for drinking, or do they use it for other things?
Yeah, they're using it just for drinking. There's maybe they use it for cooking or other things, but just consumption primarily.
And so they have their one reusable bottle and they take it back, gets filled up. Roughly how much? So it's
well, they exchange it, so they bring back their empty, or we pick up their empty and then drop the new one.
Cool. And then what happens to that physical bottle? Does that come back to HQ, or what happens?
No, it goes back to the franchise, and the franchise washes it, processes it, and puts it back on the shelf. So it's the prices range from 4 cents to about 7 cents per liter, depending on the volumes in the market. And franchisees are able to generate, well, the top performing franchisees in Rwanda are generating over $150,000 a year as their top line, and then their margin's about 20% to 30% of that, and that's on the basis of their the high volumes that they're doing.
I mean, it sounds like a pretty compelling business. Have you had any competitors come in and sort of say, I want a bit of this?
Oh yeah. We have that. We have a couple copycats. Actually, we have one in Rwanda where we turned him down for a franchise, and then he was angry, so he went and started his own water business, and actually copied our bottle, our logo, all this stuff, and just sort of changed the text a little bit on it. Is now trying to copy our tap bottle and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, we'll have tons of competition. I mean, what I'm concerned about is not competition as much as people, like illegitimate competition. If there's bad water using a similar model, that's an issue. But in places like Nairobi or Kampala, as far as micro water treatment bottling companies, there's 65 incorporated in Kampala, and there's probably 1,000 in Nairobi. I don't know. It's happening all over the place. But as far as someone using a reusable bottle and having this vision of driving the price down as much as possible, rather than extorting and getting as high up a margin as possible, is a challenge. So I mean, the reason Jibu is different is our entrepreneurs are producing the water and then selling it within a 1 kilometer radius. So that enables them to drive down the transport cost, and more importantly, sell directly to consumers rather than through a middleman retailer markup. So traditionally, someone in these other sort of small businesses or a big water manufacturing plant, you produce it centrally, distribute all across the city, and it's marked up 30-40% by a retailer, then the end user gets it. And then a lot of times it's in a disposable bottle, so you actually pay for the plastic waste, not for the water itself as a consumer. So that sort of, the whole distribution model itself, the fact that we've decentralized it, is a major competitive advantage, as well as the fact that the bottles are all reusable, but also the ownership component. So, I think if someone came in and wanted to centrally own and launch outlets, which is the first inclination I think most competitors have, they wouldn't want to give up the control that we have to put in independent owners. And so I think that's sort of the secret sauce, or whatever, sort of the undercurrent that would, I think, in the long term differentiate us. And what's happening right now is since our entrepreneurs are focused on such a small area, they're building deep relationships with their customer base, and these face-to-face relationships with their customers. And in the long term, that's really a moated sort of competitive advantage. And there'll be that customer base loyalty and sort of resistance against change. I should mention too, our vision is to go beyond water and really leverage all of these franchises as a distribution platform for any products and services that meet infrastructural needs or basic needs. And because they're high visibility retail fronts, and we have those customer relationships in place, so we really should leverage the platform for a lot of other things also.
So I get the main product you're selling, right, is water, and you're saying that essentially comes from the tap. Yeah. What are the other input costs in running one of these things, and is it easy to do, or is it difficult?
Yeah, there's actually been incredible advances in water technology in the last decade or two, and there's just been a lack of having a business model around it. Really, that's been the issue more than the water technology. the technology we use, why we use it is it's hyper energy efficient, so it's ultrafiltration, and it can run on solar and uses about a quarter of the energy of a toaster oven, and produces really good tasting water too, which is what consumers really care about. So to replicate sort of the input cost and production cost of our water compared to the quality, it's not as easy to replicate. But if someone wanted to go with a little worse tasting water and a higher production cost, that's really easy to replicate. And like reverse osmosis systems have been around for a long time, and they're very cheap. Someone can get a system that could do 2,000 liters a day for $1,000. The problem is that the taste wouldn't be good, and it would waste about half the water, and uses really high energy. But it would still be a feasible. You could still make a feasible business on that, because ultimately the cost of production would still not be that high, even if it's 5 times as high as what ours is. So yeah, I mean the water technology itself, I would say, is fairly easy to replicate.
And like the bottles, do you make them here, or?
Yeah, so we designed and built our own bottles, and had the molds manufactured in China, and then we sent them, and we have a manufacturer in Nairobi make our bottles using our molds. They are patented, utility patented, and design patented, and that's utility patented because they fit. We made them so they can fit on a dispenser, a water dispenser, but they also have a tap, and then they have a handle too. So having all those functions in one, I guess, is an innovation that we were able to patent. And then we also made the bottle a size where it can't fit through a typical water cooler bottle washing line or conveyor belt. So what was happening when we had bottles off the shelf originally with these big gallon bottles was customers couldn't serve themselves a glass of water out of it, because it's pretty awkward to pick up 5 gallons of water and pour it into a cup. But also we would lose the bottle, so we'd buy a new bottle, and then a customer would go and just buy water from a water manufacturing company or something, and then that bottle will go through their line, their system, which is an automated system. And the bottles kind of go along in this conveyor belt and go through this keyhole where they're sanitized and washed and come back out. So we designed the bottle also so it can't fit through that, so that since we invested in higher quality bottles, we'll never have to have them stolen directly from from someone else who invested in an automated system or line.
Cool. So we'll just do a few more questions, if that's all right. What's the cordial market like here, or things that you put in water, like orange squash, or are people just having water, or
yeah.
Are they adding to it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's lemon and a lot. I mean, as far as what people just throw into the water.
Yeah, are most people just having neat water, or are they sort of adding flavours to it?
Neat water. There's been flavors that I've seen that have gotten really popular. Actually, that happens a lot more in Nairobi than here. I know there was a vanilla water fad in Uganda for a little while, then the regulatory authority shut them down. But besides that, I really think it's just, I see fancy restaurants put lemon in the water, and then ice. But yeah, flavored water is something we've thought about as a natural way to go. But the part that's tricky is the natural component, and we want to avoid sort of just putting sugar in the water, having it be really unhealthy, and then just sort of an alternative to Coke or something. So that's been the tricky part, is how do we develop a supply chain where we can have something that's actually natural but tastes good to the local market. We found that when we've tried to do taste tests with some flavors, it hasn't been sweet enough if it's natural. So that artificial sweetening component is the tricky part.
And if we were to sort of project what Jibu would look like in the next sort of 3 years, 5 years time, what do you think it would look like?
Yeah. Well, we figured out how to franchise a unit level of the business, and now what we're looking at is franchising Jibu corporate as a whole, sort of the mothership itself. So right now we have an investor who invested in Jibu corporate, who's also investing his own resources to launch Jibu into Tanzania. So he's buying his own water treatment system, he's hiring all of his own staff, and we're just sharing with him all the learnings we've had, our systems, processes, our brand, supply chain, all those components. So if we can build that model, which we're calling a regional developer model, that's how we can really scale and contextualize at a meta level rather than just the micro level, and grow really fast. So we're looking at 1,000 businesses within the next 5 years, and first sort of saturating or growing as much as possible in the East African market, but outside of that also launching in 1 or 2 new regions outside of East Africa altogether, using that regional developer model.
And how can people listening at home follow this story? Do you have a presence on social media, or what's the best way to?
Yeah, our website's jibuco.com, JIBUCO.com, and then our Twitter is @JibuCo, and our Facebook is JibuCo. That's the best way to track us down.
What does Jibu mean?
Jibu means the answer or solution in Swahili, and the reason we chose it is because it's just like the English word answer, which can be imperative, asking you to respond, or can mean the solution. And we wanted it to be a lot bigger than just water, because, like I said, we're about finding bigger solutions that can be driven by local owners than just water. And, well, practical side, the word was easy to pronounce across all the places we were working, and didn't have an immediate meaning to most clients. So we're like, okay, it's nice to have an underlying meaning, but not something that's distracting from.
Awesome, cool. Well, Galen, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Sam. I appreciate it.
Before we head, just a quick moment to say thank you for listening. You can see the show notes of this episode by heading to samfloy.com/podcast. That's samfloy.com/podcast. Now, this show is still relatively new, and so I really appreciate you making it through to the end. What would be great is, if you're enjoying it, to tell a couple of friends about it too, in case they'd also be interested in listening. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email me, podcast@samfloy.com, and I'd be happy to chat. In any case, have a great week, and speak to you soon.